Good afternoon. A very warm welcome to all the participants to the 11th Pani Pe Charcha Clean Water Talk series. Today's topic of discussion is source sustainability and environment protection. We have with us a very experienced speaker in the field, Priyanka Singh from WaterAid. Let's welcome Priyanka Singh for this talk. Clean water talks are set up in a pedagogy mode so that all the participants who would want to adopt the best practices can refer to these segments and include the best practices in their program. It is also a method of bringing in together all the partners directly in interaction with each other so that they can reach out as needed. I am Poonam Sevak from Safe Water Network, Vice President Programs and Partnerships. Safe Water Network is a New York-based organization working in India and Ghana, bringing safe water access to over 1.7 million people through decentralized safe drinking water solutions. We also work in policy and advisory, technical assistance to the government, SWE Alliance, and networking. Along with me is Mr. Chigose from USAID. Mr. Chigose is a Foreign Service Officer and he is a partner in developing this program with us. This is a Pan-India program. Mr. Chigose brings in rich experience on environmental issues, air pollution, sustainable landscapes, biodiversity, and WASH. His strength lies in local-led development, where he has been working right from survey design, monitoring and evaluation, implementation, and data analysis. He has had a rich experience in sub-Saharan Africa. Prior to joining USAID, Mr. Chigose was with the University of Colorado, where he worked as a program specialist in food, water, and energy nexus in UK, Germany, and US. Mr. Chigose holds a Master's of Public Policy and Master of Science in Natural Resource Management from University of Michigan. Over to you, Mr. Chigose.
Thank you so much, Poonam. Good afternoon, everyone. I hope you're doing well. Like Poonam mentioned, my name is Chigazie Oku, and I work with USAID India, specifically focusing on environmental issues. I'm super excited to participate in the 11th edition of the Clean Water Talks, where we're able to learn about best practices and innovative approaches undertaken by sector leaders from the WASH space. And as you all know, USAID is committed to improving access to safe and clean drinking water for populations throughout the world. USAID believes that working with local partners and communities is necessary to creating long-lasting and effective solutions to issues related to water, hygiene, and sanitation. Here in India, USAID partners with the Safe Water Network to create innovative and sustainable solutions to improve access to clean water and sanitation while empowering communities. Today, we'll learn from Priyanka Singh, the Director of Programs and Implementation at WaterAid, who will, like Poonam mentioned, talk about source sustainability and environmental protection at WaterAid TN. I'm super excited to learn from her.
Thank you, Mr. Chigose. Thank you so much. Priyanka Singh is a social sector specialist. She has a postgraduate from Institute of Rural Management and 23 experience of working in the field. She's a programs director at WaterAid India. WaterAid, as we all know, is an international not-for-profit organization working on water supply, sanitation, hygiene, and with the motto of serving these products to everyone, everywhere. In India, WaterAid has been working since 1986 on the above programs to reach to the most vulnerable and the poorest communities. They operate in 14 states, 64 districts, and 7 cities across India. WaterAid works with the government at the center, the state, and the Panchayati Raj or the ULB level, as well as with the communities. They work to build linkages, policy and advisory, strengthening institutions, training and capacity building, as well as bringing in cutting-edge technology and environmental friendly solutions. Before Priyanka Singh dives deep into the topic of discussion, source sustainability and environmental action, She has shared with us a very beautiful video which showcases her work. So let's play that video and then she will dive into her presentation.
भारत ने स्वच्छता की सुरक्षा के क्षेत्र में अभूतपूर्व तरक्की की है। सदियों से चली आ रही खुले में शौच की प्रथा को रोककर हमने न सिर्फ स्वच्छता को सुनिश्चित किया है, बल्कि समुदाय को बेहतर जीवन की ओर अग्रसर किया है। ओडीएफ घोषित करने के बाद मल प्रबंधन अब स्वच्छता की डोर को खींच रहा है और उत्तर प्रदेश के अमेठी जिले में ये पहल जोरों शोरों से चल रही है।
स्वच्छ भारत मिशन के पहले फेज के अंतर्गत जनपद अमेठी को ओडीएफ घोषित किया गया था और जो सेकंड फेज में चल रहा है उसमें सॉलिड लिक्विड वेस्ट मैनेजमेंट पर कार्य हो रहा है। इसी क्रम में जनपद अमेठी में भी कार्य प्रारंभ हुआ है और इसका जो मेन कंपोनेंट है जो कि फीकल स्लज ट्रीटमेंट प्लांट का है, उसमें जनपद अमेठी में एक बहुत ही अच्छा इनिशिएटिव लिया गया है। जो मेन समस्या हमारे सामने आ रही थी वो फीकल स्लज के ट्रीटमेंट की आ रही थी, क्योंकि पहले फेज में हमारे सारे टॉयलेट्स बन चुके हैं। उसके पश्चात उसमें जो उसका स्लज है उसको कैसे हम ट्रीट करें, उसमें जो गंदगी वहाँ पे डेवलप हो रही है उसको हम कैसे हटाएं वहाँ से और उसका बेस्ट यूज़ कैसे करें। इसी को फोकस को लेते हुए यहाँ पर फीकल स्लज ट्रीटमेंट प्लांट के बारे में सोचा गया और उसको यहाँ पर स्थापित किया गया है।
FSTP या फीकल स्लज ट्रीटमेंट प्लांट एक नई संकल्पना थी और इसलिए इसे सही जगह पर बनाया जाए ये निर्णय लेना जरूरी था।
हमें एक ऐसी साइट की जरूरत थी जहाँ के लोग मोटिवेटेड हो, काम करने के इच्छुक हों और वो कनेक्टेड हो। बेनीपुर एक ऐसी जगह है जो कि हमारे हाईवे से कनेक्टेड है। हमारे पास में एक बड़ा पीस लैंड का मिला जिसमें कि हम अपने प्लांट को स्थापित कर सकते थे और वहाँ के लोग भी इस काम के लिए बहुत ज़्यादा मोटिवेटेड थे। तो इन सभी वजह से ऐसा हुआ कि हमारा जो प्लांट था बहुत ही जल्दी वहाँ पर स्थापित हुआ और उसका एक बहुत ही पॉजिटिव मैसेज न केवल उस गाँव के लोगों में बल्कि बाकी दूर दूर तक उसका फैला।
FSTP के कार्य को सुचारू रूप से चलाने में सरकार और सभी संगठनों की भागीदारी जरूरी थी। समुदाय से जुड़े लोकल लीडर्स, स्वयं सहायता समूह और ग्राम प्रधान ने स्वच्छता के इस जन आंदोलन में एक अहम भूमिका निभाई। इतना ही नहीं, समाज में परिवर्तन के प्रमुख प्रतिनिधियों द्वारा यानी कि बच्चों द्वारा इस मुहिम के बारे में आम लोगों को बताकर जागरूक किया।
इसके बनने से बाहर का वातावरण जो है वो शुद्ध रहेगा। लोग टैंक खाली करा करके बाहर फेंकते हैं किसी नाले में, तालाब में, वो समस्या ख़त्म हो जाएगी। लोग यहाँ पर लेकर जाएंगे, इसका ट्रीटमेंट होगा और इससे खाद बनेगी और पानी भी, सिंचाई का भी काम आएगा वो। अब इसमें भागीदारी के लिए 11 ग्राम पंचायतें चयन की गई हैं। 11 ग्राम पंचायतों के जिम्मे वो सौंप दिया जाएगा और ग्राम पंचायतें उसको अपने हिसाब से काम करेंगी। बीच में बैठकें यहाँ पे हो रही हैं, समुदाय को जागरूक किया जा रहा है और लोगों को इस तरह से कहा जा रहा है कि आप लोग अपना जब टैंक खाली कराएंगे तो सीधे FSTP पे आना चाहिए और यहीं पे इसका ट्रीटमेंट होगा।
मल पहले स्क्रीनिंग चेंबर से गुजरता है जहां सॉलिड वेस्ट या बड़े पदार्थ द्रव्य से अलग हो सके। स्क्रीनिंग चेंबर से छना हुआ मल एनेरोबिक स्टेबलाइजेशन रिएक्टर या ASR में जाता है। ये एक 3 चेंबरों का रिएक्टर होता है जिसमें आसानी से घुलने वाले बायोडिग्रेडेबल पदार्थों के माध्यम से मल का स्थिरीकरण होता है। इस प्रक्रिया में गंध कम होता है, वेक्टर्स नियंत्रित होते हैं और निपटान क्षमता में सुधार होता है। इतना ही नहीं, आगे की उपचार प्रक्रिया ASR की मदद से और सुचारू हो जाती है। द्रव्य पदार्थ अब आगे PDB या प्लांटेड ड्राइंग बेड में जाता है जहां वो प्राकृतिक तरीके से एक विशिष्ट पौधे की मदद से डिग्रेड होते हैं। PDB एक ग्रेडेड फिल्टर मीडिया है जहां मल के तरल और ठोस पदार्थ अलग होते हैं और सूखते हैं। ठोस पदार्थ को बेड से समय समय पर निकाला भी जाता है। PDB से रिसने वाला जल ISAF या इंटीग्रेटेड सेटलर एंड एनेरोबिक फिल्टर में जाता है जहां आगे के शुद्धिकरण की प्रक्रिया होती है और जल PGF यानी प्लांटेड ग्रेवल फिल्टर में तृतीयक उपचार के लिए जाता है। उपचारित जल वहां से पुनः शुद्धिकरण और संग्रहण के लिए डिसइंफेक्शन चैनल से होकर कलेक्शन टैंक में जाता है।
ये जो व्यवस्था जो बनी है इसकी 3 मुख्य विशेषताएं हैं। पहली चीज़ तो ये है कि ये प्रकृति आधारित है। दूसरी जो विशेषता है इस व्यवस्था की वो ये है कि इस पूरी प्रक्रिया में इससे कोई बदबू नहीं निकल कर आती है जिससे कि और लोगों को परेशानी हो। और तीसरी जो विशेषता है इसको इस हिसाब से बनाया गया है, इसकी कल्पना इस तरीके से की गई है कि भविष्य में अगर इसकी क्षमता को और बढ़ाने की ज़रूरत है तो इसी के साथ और मॉड्यूल्स जोड़े जा सकते हैं ताकि भविष्य में भी ये इसी व्यवस्था को और काम में लिया जा सकता है। और इस व्यवस्था से लगभग 74,000 लोगों को लाभ मिल सकता है जो 11 ग्राम पंचायतों में रहते हैं।
अमेठी उत्तर प्रदेश में बिल गेट्स फाउंडेशन और वाटर एड के सौजन्य से एक FSTP लगा। माननीय प्रधानमंत्री जी ने जब राष्ट्रीय आह्वान किया स्वच्छता का, तब स्वच्छ भारत अभियान में सफलतापूर्वक अमेठी जनपद, अमेठी लोकसभा भी जुड़ा। लेकिन एक चुनौती थी लोकसभा क्षेत्र के सामने कि जो मलबा इकट्ठा होता उसे हम किस प्रकार से एनवायरनमेंट मतलब पर्यावरण की मर्यादा में रहकर उसका कोई समाधान ढूंढ सकें। इसी श्रृंखला में बिल गेट्स फाउंडेशन और वाटर एड ने अमेठी को FSTP के रूप में एक सौगात दी। आज लोकसभा अमेठी क्षेत्र के हर नागरिक की ओर से इस प्रयास के लिए मैं वाटर एड और विशेषतः बिल गेट्स फाउंडेशन को आभार व्यक्त करती हूँ।
आज अमेठी का ये FSTP बदलाव का प्रतीक बनकर खड़ा है, जिसकी लहरें पूरे राज्य में तेजी से फैल रही हैं।
Now I invite Priyanka Singh to walk us through the presentation and share the best practices on source sustainability and environment protection.
Thank you, Poonam. The context in which we today talking about water sustainability is not just a value-loaded stuff that we should sustain water. We should look at environment sustainability, environment friendly, because it's a good thing to do. We're not looking at it only from that perspective. We're looking at it because we have a crisis sitting on our head. And the crisis is actually already there. It's just that our different measurements kind of put a different goalpost for the crisis, that when is it going to overwhelm us. But if you look at any kind of data that comes in, the goalposts just shift by a couple of years here and there, but they all do very, very strongly bring to light that there is a strong water crisis that's just around the corner. Given that we have to work on two ends, I think as we keep saying that we really need to rationalize our water usage, and we need to rationalize the way we interact with environment and the way we treat environment. Water is just one part of it. And the other is that we also have to think urgently about recharge. And the important point, like I said, nothing new, but it's still important to keep underlining it every time, that both these strategies need both a systemic response and a societal response. Often we shift in terms of responsibility and ownership, that unless you have a systemic response, you can't solve it. And the system says it's a societal response. Climate change, water, environment is a matter of habit. But again, once we all know that it's a matter of both. We need systemic change. We need societal change. We need both. Also, I think, water is by and large such a strongly shared common property resource that you cannot talk about any kind of sustainability around water without linking the two. But having said that, the focus of my call today, the focus of my talk today would be that how do we as in institutions like WaterAid, institutions like Safe Water Network, so how can we look at sustainability? What can we do to make our water sources more sustainable? So as I said, there is no denying the importance of both kind of systems, but what can we do to make it sustainable? That's what I'll try and focus in the next 5-10 minutes. Another part of the context that makes, in which I would like to contextualize my talk is that, as you can see that today the groundwater recharge that we're talking about, if you just look at the gray is the biggest recharge that's happening is monsoon. So bulk of the recharge that's happening is during the monsoon through the rains. The other biggest chunk that we are talking about is equal, let's say the blue and the green. If you look at it is that something that's probably happening. A bit of it is accidental, that whatever it is, whether it is gray water, whether it is certain kind of wells that are recharging, whether it is some intervention such as ours by the government or non-profit or individuals. But that's the smaller part that you can see. I mean, 58 plus 9%, more than that, more than 60% of your recharge is happening through rains. And we need to really do something on the other to kind of accelerate the rate of which recharge that is currently happening. So what is it that we are trying to do if we want to accelerate and not just be dependent on monsoons for the recharge? If we look at that, what is it that we want to do? We do a couple of things to do, and I'll be talking about that, to accelerate this rate of recharge. But whatever we do, and like I said, I will be talking about a sample of such technologies, but whatever we do, that also follows a certain kind of an approach, and how do we do it? And I think the biggest component of that approach is localizing it, and also thinking about the ownership within the communities for which they are working. See, we're not talking about large scale water sources, right? As I was trying to say, water is a shared resource, and common property resources, shared common property resources usually have huge political and social implications the moment you want to do anything. You want to do conservation, you want to talk. So, and that's something that often that we are not talking about enough. So if you look at a large water resource or water body, the aquifers that we're talking of, you can't even see. There is no ownership that's defined around it, and you want to tap it there. It becomes difficult because of the ownership issues, because of contestations around ownership, contestation around boundaries, and so therefore, when we start talking about sustainability, we start talking about recharge of groundwater, it is important that we understand that what I recharge may not necessarily benefit me. It is and therefore I think that part of the context was a very important slide that I wanted it very much to be. That's an important and a critical piece in any kind of natural resource conservation that we talk about, and water being very, very critical. That unless you locate it in the political, ecological context of it, no point talking about just techniques of how to do it. Hence, when we talk about source sustainability, environmental protection, it is important that the communities understand it, that what they are doing may benefit them, but also it is a larger common good. And therefore, what we are doing is for a larger common good. And that kind of preparedness is an integral part of an approach. Easier said than done. And therefore, it is also important that you create that kind of, I would say, that repository of not just ownership, but ownership, skills, and knowledge at a local level. And it is very important that we try and nurture local leadership beyond those in positions of leadership. So leadership of those in positions of leadership, whether it is the panchayats or others, and those beyond this. So leadership of women, leadership of youth, leadership of old, everybody. But really nurturing and deepening the citizenry to talk about water protection as a larger common good. The second important part of this approach is to look at technologies that are simple, technologies that are appropriate, most apt, but easy. Often technologies which are very sophistication can move the needle of ownership from citizens to technocrats. And that's a fine balance that one has to keep looking at often. So you want technology that is appropriate, you want technology that delivers the result, but yet it should be a technology which is easy to maintain, easy to look at, so that leadership stays, involvement and ownership stays with local people. The third important point of this approach is also looking at taking the solutions to the government and to the other bodies, either in terms of technical support, knowledge dissemination, experience dissemination, and working through a partnership model. The last point, I think, which I would say is critical in the approach of what we would like to do, is measurement. So basically, there are 4 critical elements of approach. One is community ownership, and ownership of not just looking at direct benefit, but ownership of trying to work on a larger common good, number 1. Number 2 was the important point that we talked about, is technology being appropriate and the best cutting edge, yet simple. Third is looking at partnerships with the government and other players. And the fourth is measurement. These would be 4 critical aspects that kind of underline everything that we do. Now, having said that, what is it? How do we do? Some examples of our work on source sustainability are here, and we'll show you a couple of pictures. In fact, I'm going to skip the next slide and first request the organizers to help me share pictures of Egypt. But some examples of direct work in terms of source sustainability are these. Abandoned dug wells. In fact, today also I just saw an abandoned dug well. I am in rural Uttar Pradesh, near Lucknow. And so looking at abandoned dug wells, their restoration and recharge. The second is bore well recharge. The third is pond restoration with injection wells, without injection wells also. And the last example that I'm going to talk about is stormwater recharging. So these are 4 examples, I would say. They are not the complete list. 4 examples of things that we have tried at source sustainability. Some indirect measures which do other things, they very much help into source sustainability, but the other 2 other things is also water budgeting, looking at water usage and water availability. And you just saw a film on treatment and reuse of grey water. So these are some examples, some pictures that I wanted to show you. I'm told most of you are quite familiar with this kind of work, but for those who are not, just to show that you will see such kind of abandoned dug wells almost in most parts of the country. These pictures are from different parts, mostly from the southern part of the country. And then again, this one, like I said, is from Kerala. You can see the same dug wells, how you restore it, you recharge it. So some we have done directly as demonstration and also direct relief, and then use that to talk about and get the government to do more and to look at these wells. Just to run through the photos with you. So again, models of what, so the 4 things that I spoke about, just want to run you through some pictures of that to explain what we're talking about. So these are some models of the well recharging. You can see the pipes and the valves and the levers all. So getting the rainwater into them, first through a filtration and then to recharge. Also to give you some insight that you saw a few, just a snapshot of that so how have these recharge wells, I mean, what are they doing too? And you can see that the extent to which they dried down has reduced considerably. That if earlier 41% of the wells that we were talking about were drying down, now only 8% are drying down. So there is a considerable impact about these drying in summers. Also the months, has the months of dry period. So summer can be anything. Now I don't even know which months are summer and which are monsoon and which are winter. But for, let's call them not summer, let's call them dry periods. So if earlier the non-water seasons were 5 months, that has come down to 1.5 months. So the dry periods have reduced. There you saw 41% to 8%, and the dry months have come down from 5 months to 1.5 months. Also mixing of rainwater, as we have been told since I think ages, is one of the best water that you can get. So does the mixing of water improve the water quality? And the test results are still being tabulated, and I will have it. But if you look at respondents, just people who are using the water saying, they say it tastes better. It is much better, lighter. Often they use words like this to say. So the water quality, which is not, I mean, it goes with our intuitive sense that it should improve with rainwater coming in, and especially there's a filtration. So as per users' report, water quality has improved. As I was saying, that these are some examples: the abandoned dug wells, borewell recharge, pond restoration, stormwater recharging that we have tried. And most of them have worked very well, each having they all have to be chosen as per the context and as per the need of the area. I showed you some samples and photos of that. If you were to take a quick look at a chart that I think Poonam nudged us to prepare, that how do these things cost? So these are estimated costs which are in front of you, because a lot of it depends, as you all know, depends on the condition of, let's say, the well that we're talking about. How dilapidated it is, what is the depth, what is it that is talking about. So these costs are a bit of an indicative cost. Don't hold us to it. It will depend on the site and depend on how close is your material available and skills available and so on. So it's an indicative cost. But what I think I will use the slide to say is that if you look at the skills and the technique required, they're not very complicated. They're not really very complicated. They are simple things which people can be trained to, people can learn. So it is something that is pretty doable. And the costs, like I said, they are indicative, but the only point I would highlight in the cost that you can think, they are not exorbitant. They're not hugely expensive things that we're talking about. We're talking about simple technology, easy to do, and reasonable cost in terms of what we're talking about. So in a way, that's the most of what I had to say, and to go towards the end. So what you saw the kind of work that we, this gray water treatment, this fecal sludge treatment plant, the film that you saw, that's a new area that we have ventured into. I think if we talk 3 months, 6 months later, I will have better data on it, that how much water is being treated, how much it's a new area we ventured into, just 5 FST in the conclusion, that if you want to make these things last, what I said in the approach, the only way to last is that for all of us to start thinking about it as something that is a common good, having the right technology, having the right collaborations, and working with partners, and thinking about leadership at all levels. Thank you.
Thank you. So while the participants put in their questions, we have received 2 questions, and Priyanka, I would like you to address the first question, that while we saw the skills required and the expenses, everything is doable. And we understood from your presentation that the biggest challenge is the social and the political challenge, and the need of the community, whether it is going to benefit me now, or is it for a long term? Will it benefit me at all? How have you overcome these difficulties? That's the first question. And this is followed up by another question, which I'll ask you once this is through.
Thank you, Poonam. I think if I understand your question right, you're basically saying that how do you get the social ownership in place?
That's right. And the government collaboration of a public land or a public property when you are doing recharge.
Yeah. So let's talk about communities first, and then the government in general. So in a way, communities are, again, it's a tested and tried method, and yet most of us fail because we kind of now put communities as a footnote rather. The tested and tried method is that first genuinely believe that they are important. And therefore, every process of our work has to be starting from there. That you have to start where people are. What is their need? What are the problems that they are facing? And how do they think they can come around together and include them in every process, and not include them, like I said, as a beneficiary or as an afterthought, but genuine respect that they have some ideas, they have some thoughts, some abilities, and some constraints also, which is why we are there to help you take care of those constraints or ease it, but they have some ideas. So number one, that. But number two, if that's the guiding principle, Poonam, then also, like I said, we can't look at source sustainability only as a technology solution. That means that every step that we go, supposing you're doing an injection well, there will be an engineer who will draw the design, that make the DPR, but that is done in consultation with the villagers. It is shared with them. It is talked about that, okay, this is what we are thinking. Does this nala actually flow? We are putting an injection well in the nala because the civil engineer is also saying, but do you remember that this nala ever flowed 50 years ago, 10 years ago, 8 years ago? So consulting them at every stage, sharing them. Also bringing in, I think, community management systems from day one and not wait for the hardware to be completed and then bring it. So from day one, bringing in who will supervise the labor when the work is being constructed? What about after? Who will go and collect the community contribution? We don't go around collecting it. You collect it. Who will keep it? And so involving them in all. And the last point I'll say about community, Poonam, trust is something that happens because of behavior, how you behave, not because of what your standard operating procedures say. So trust happens how you behave, and how you behave is a reflection of your organizational culture. And I am proud to say that I think WaterAid has that culture where the staff embodies it, that it is a matter of trust and genuine respect. The last point about I say why we are able to do it is all low cost doesn't mean low quality. And if you give the best quality stuff, the best technology, the best thing to people who need it the most, that gets you a lot of participation and a lot of trust. And that is what I think has also been WaterAid's USP, that we try and take in the best. Where we are not sure and we are researching, we are experimenting, that's another matter. That we will say, look, we don't know. Let's try it out together. This might not work. This might fail. Let's be honest. But where we know, then you take the best technology. You just saw the film. It uses a high-end technology of FSTP. It doesn't uses some kind of anything that will go in the name of low cost. Actually, it's an Amethi who will see. And Amethi is still popular. Our other ones are this. So anyway, so that's how we bring in community. See, the government, I think we have been now in talking, we have been a little lucky, Poonam, that our work on ground has got us respect. They have seen that we are technologically sound. We do what we say. So the government also trusts us, and we have good technical collaboration with most state governments that we are working with, and to a large extent also at the center.
Priyanka, thank you very much. We have got the nuances about the strength which WaterAid brings, working with the community right from the beginning through the design, planning, working in a trustworthy mode. And I'm sure this is a very important step if we want to create long-term sustainable solutions which live even beyond the programmatic period. I have a question from one of the participants, Mr. Madhu Krishnamurthy from Water Health. His question regarding the injection wells is, do these wells require local CGWB approval? Are there any restrictions regarding the same?
Chandra, please correct me, but I don't think most require CGWB approvals.
You are correct, Priyanka. In each state, it is a different authority. Even local governments have approved many such interventions.
Thank you.
Panchayats, you need approval.
Okay, panchayats, the local government, but not the central government or the CGWBs. So thank you so much for this. Another question, what are the regulatory compliances or approvals that are needed before you work in a space which is basically a dug well or a bore well or a public property land where you are doing groundwater recharge? So how do you get those permissions? How much time does it require?
So since most of our work is at a local level, so most of your permissions would be from, let's say, district and below at best. And depending upon the ownership, like you said, if the land is on, landowners ownership is mostly of three kinds, no? Either the revenue department will have it, or the panchayat will have it, or sometimes the forest department will have it. If it is private ownership, then the villagers come together and take agreement from the private owner, and they will sign some kind of a agreement saying that it is private, but the village will share it, and so on, so on. With panchayats, it's not difficult because you're working at the local level with the village. Same with revenue department. So that's from where with forest department, there are often restrictions because forest department does not allow you to do certain kind of works in their land. So that is one area that you might have to go into specific details.
Yeah. So do you get a MOU or a legal document signed between the WaterAid and the, right? And
not between WaterAid, between the communities.
Okay, so between the community and the revenue department, or community and the forest department.
Yeah, permission is happening. So normally they take a no objection certificate or and a permission.
Thank you very much for this. Have you done any of these activities in hilly terrains? What has been the experience? Did the cost increase? What has been the experiences in the desert land? And how do you go about measuring the success and the KPIs to report to the donor? These are the three questions. Either you may take it or I welcome Chandra for it.
Okay, in hilly terrains, we have experimented both dug well recharge and spring protection for recharge. Within spring also, we have done injection wells and spring boxes for groundwater recharge. We don't have much experience in desert areas, and KPIs is part of the presentation. We measure the quantum of water recharged using the established standard methods, and we use the number of structures promoted, the capacity enhanced for storage and recharge, and people benefiting. So some of the key aspects are in the presentation.
Thank you very much, Chandra, and thank you very much, Priyanka. It was very insightful, and we are very pleased that we could get so much cross-learning from you. On our panel, we have with us Dr. Vijay Lakshmi from Development Alternatives. She is also working a lot on source sustainability and groundwater recharge. Dr. Vijay Lakshmi, would you like to say something? Very nice to see you, ma'am.
Thank you, Dr. Poonam, and very nice presentation. Not only today, every presentation is very interesting examples I am hearing. This particular one is of a very interesting subject to my heart, and I keep wondering, Dr. WaterAid's team, is there any example that you can quote? So far, we are hearing mostly the developmental model of water source sustainability. Is there any examples that we can think of, just as water ATMs have come as a social enterprises, taking on the responsibility of treating and supplying clean drinking water? And the before steps are in ensuring the water wherever they are drawing from, can that also be converted into a social enterprise? And where social entrepreneurs, a group of maybe community groups or individual, can take over of actually coming out with harvesting some water and making it available, so that we can reduce the involvement of high-tech solutions wherever, especially in the areas where fluorosis, arsenic affected areas, nitrate, TDS, and we are continuously using technologies which are going to be treating, but there is going to be sludge, there is going to be high involvement of technology. So I always keep thinking, why don't we marry these three entrepreneurs, source sustainable entrepreneurs, and if needed, only minimum technology for treatment and distribution.
So thank you, Dr. Vijayalakshmi, putting the long question short and simple for you, Dr. Priyanka Singh. Which Dr. Vijayalakshmi is wanting to ask that while we are doing this work of source sustainability and environment protection, can it in some format be linked up to an entrepreneurship program? If so, have you done any pilot, or do you think it's a good idea?
Definitely, entrepreneurship model is a good idea. And in fact, there are thriving water markets in the country. We may not call them entrepreneurs, we may call them whatever, but that doesn't take away the fact that there are thriving water markets in all parts of the country and very detailed. And in fact, IWMI has done, and so did where I studied, IRMA and IWMI have done series of studies. Tushar Shah's earlier work was all on water markets. So water markets are all over. What the water market has not done too much is that testing the quality of the water that is being supplied. That's something that has not often been done, because most water markets are in distressed context. So there you just take water which is better than what you have. And that is something that I think WaterAid has done extensively, training local youth. And DA itself were the first ones to bring out the Jaltara kits that WaterAid has also used extensively among other field testing kits, that getting local people to do water testing. That's one thing that has been done. The second is that we will be able to, I think, again, show something about, like you said, fluoride. And so in Bihar, there are places where we are trying to do, I would say, modular, not household level only and big, but modular arsenic treatment systems. How that will get into an entrepreneur mode is yet to be seen, but that is something, a potential, because there are pockets in different parts of the country which have specific problems, high arsenic, high fluoride. So especially in arsenic, fluoride you can still live with if you take care of other factors, but as hyper arsenic and that I think needs to be tried a little bit more. But what I will again repeat, Poonam, I think is getting into water markets is something maybe that should be one of your talk series. Understanding that more before we start loading onto new entrepreneurs is very important and critical.
Thank you very much, Priyanka. We also have on the participants our CEO, Mr. Kurt Soderlin, joining in from New York. So, Kurt, over to you, and after that to Mr. Chigoze.
Good evening, everyone. Good afternoon. I'm not sure my video is working right now, but really appreciated this conversation. It's terrific presentation and on such an important topic to ensure local communities really take accountability, responsibility for stewardship of water. It's so important for all the work we're doing, and enabling them, empowering them with tools and appropriate technologies that can be adopted is, I think, so important, and it's terrific to see this be a topic for this group within SEWA. So thank you all for your participation, and Priyanka for your presentation. It was really very important work that we should all be taking time to focus on. Thank you, Poonam.
Thank you, Kurt, and thank you, Priyanka. I must say that it has been a very insightful experience for us to learn from you, and we are very grateful to you for sharing your work, for answering our questions. Now I will ask Mr. Chigoze to give the concluding remarks.
Yeah, thank you, everyone, especially to you, Priyanka, for teaching us a little bit more about WaterAid and about sustainability at water ATMs. We really did appreciate learning from you and hearing about the experiences of the organization, and had such an enlightening conversation. So thank you everyone for attending, and thank you so much to the Safe Water Network for hosting and for bringing us all together. Have a great afternoon, everyone. Take care.
And yes, as we say goodbye, I would like to express my sincerest thanks to Chandra for contributing to the presentation, for being here to answer the questions along with Priyanka. We wish WaterAid all the best and all our partners, and we hope each one of us contribute to put some water back into the soil so that the water table rises, and collaboratively we are able to create water positive ecology wherever we are working. That is very important. Thank you so much.